The next article I wanted to talk about is titled Preacher, COVID Church Closures Will Be Met with Our Second Amendment Right. This is by Beth Stoneburner on the Friendly Atheist website. So let's give it a read and see what it says. Always one to find and promote a conspiracy where there isn't one, right-wing hate preacher Greg Locke says he's ready to use his Second Amendment right to protect his first, even though literally no one is trying to prevent him from speaking. Locke wrongly thinks conservatives who spread COVID lies and election conspiracies have some First Amendment right to broadcast their views on every social media site, and he'll shoot his imaginary enemies the first chance he gets. He explained this to host Stu Peters of Red Voice Media. There's a clip with this, so let's give this clip a watch and see what he had to say.
This conservative censorship is true across the board. I've been banned from, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook has banned me, put me in jail many, many times. I'm sure you and your program, being as bold as it is, you've experienced the exact same thing. And so,
being as bold as it is, this guy, I've actually talked about Stu Peters before, or I've had clips of him on my channel before. I think he was interviewing Deanna Lorraine one time, and I had that clip on my channel. It wasn't even that long ago. It was few weeks ago. But anyways, I find it interesting that Greg Locke is saying that he's being censored by being kicked off of Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all of that stuff, right? In the strictest sense, I'm going to deviate a little bit from what some of my colleagues have to say about this. In the strictest sense, this is censorship. He's right. He is being censored. But his First Amendment right is not being violated. He's not being jailed, and he's not being silenced by the government. That's really the key here. This is a law against government intrusion. When this law was written, the way that people spoke was on a soapbox on a street corner, right? Who else was going to censor them? The government. That's it. That's the only group of people who could. Because standing on a soapbox on a street corner is not controlled or owned by a private company. So Greg Locke has the right to go to a public park or a sidewalk and stand on a box and say what he has to say. He has that right. But he can't go into Home Depot and stand there right in the middle of a crowd and scream it to the crowd in Home Depot and expect to stay. He can expect to be kicked out of Home Depot. Crowds gather at Home Depot. People gather in stores, right? When you go to Walmart, you see 500 people walking around. It's a perfect location to scream the craziest shit you can think of at the top of your lungs because there's a crowd there. You want to go where the crowd is, right? You're not allowed to walk into a Walmart and start screaming at the top of your lungs. They will kick you out too. That is technically censorship, but Walmart has the legal right to do that. They don't have to put up with you screaming and throwing a fit in the middle of their store. You can go to the sidewalk outside of Walmart and scream at the top of your lungs if you'd like, and you will not be censored by the government. If you are, then you have a real full-blown lawsuit in your lap waiting to sue the government, and you would be right to. It's basically the exact same situation with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everybody. You are in their store, at their storefront, with their customers, screaming at their customers. The fact that YouTube is banning extremism from their private platform is not a violation of anybody's rights. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that.
for you and your program, being as bold as it is, you've experienced the exact same thing. And so people that say that this is not an attack have lost their mind. This is an absolute attack on our First Amendment right. And I tell people all the time, look.
No, it isn't, first of all. And second, it's not right-wingers who are being targeted here. It's extremists. Twitter kicked a bunch of QAnon accounts off of their platform a while back. You guys remember that? YouTube and Twitter and Spotify and Apple and a bunch of others kicked Alex Jones off their platform forever ago, too. It's extremism that they've been targeting, not just right-wing people. If right-wingers, Republicans, continue to go down the extremism rabbit hole, you know, they can expect to get kicked off the platforms too. That's just what it is. If you don't want to be kicked off, then don't be a complete fucking lunatic talking about the government inserting microchips under your skin if you get a vaccine. That's fucking nuts. I know you don't see how nutty this is, but the rest of the world is just looking at you with their fucking mouths wide open.
Amendment right. And I tell people all the time, look, when it comes to our church and what we need to say and remaining open, that when they impede upon our First Amendment right, we'll meet them at the door of the tent with our Second Amendment right. Because
okay, so that's the point that's really important. When they impede upon our First Amendment right, which is not what's happening here, then we'll meet them with our Second Amendment right. That is a threat of violence, and philosophically speaking, that's my line. Violent rhetoric like that. If somebody is saying something that is encouraging violence, I'm totally okay with deplatforming them. Not necessarily putting them in jail, but deplatforming. I want them removed from the public spotlight if they encourage violence. And that's exactly what Trump did. And not only did he encourage violence, it led to real-world violence on January 6th. And as a result, he was deplatformed from Twitter. The right decision, in my opinion. Later on, we're going to talk about Steven Anderson being deplatformed from YouTube and why I agree with that decision too. Generally speaking, I want people to be able to say what they want to say. For the most part, I believe in freedom of speech. To the bottom of my heart, I really do. I believe in freedom of speech more than some people around me do. And I get criticized for how much I believe in it and how much I want people to be able to speak freely. The moment that you kick somebody off of a platform, take Alex Jones for example. The moment he got kicked off of the platform, off of all of the platforms, he got this massive swell of support for just like a minute. I think it was like a couple of months when he got this gigantic swell of support. Everybody was talking about the guy and how he was deplatformed and all this other stuff. You know, Forbes, Huffington Post, Talking Points Memo, is that another left-wing one? Just every single outlet out there, not just left-wing ones, but right-wing ones too. They were all talking about him for like 2 months, and all of a sudden, it just went dark. Nobody's talking about Alex Jones anymore. He got 2 months of coverage, and then that was it. That's because that's how deplatforming operates. When he was deplatformed, the guy was going around saying, "You think you can strike me down? I'm just going to come back stronger than ever." Did that happen? Of course not. If you don't have access to this gigantic audience that YouTube and Twitter provides, and you have to hoof it on your own, like Alex Jones did, creating his own website and hosting his own servers for InfoWars, if you haven't done that, your voice is going to die out. That's how this works. Are people really asking if deplatforming actually works? Of course deplatforming works, yes. You remove people from where the crowds are, the crowd's not going to hear them speaking. How is this confusing to anybody? Of course deplatforming works. But when that happens, when Alex Jones was removed, guess what happened after that? The only people who were really listening to Alex Jones were people who already had a slant in that direction, already basically knew who he was, and were already pretty far to the right. And that means he had no checks to the crazy shit he said. He could get crazier and crazier. Who is going to fact check this guy? Nobody. He's just going to go completely off the fucking deep end, and his audience is going to sit there listening and eating it up. When you deplatform somebody like that, the group that they lead become more insulated from the outside world, more of like an echo chamber type of situation, and they get more radicalized. That's what deplatforming does. It's a trade-off. If you are okay with these groups becoming more radicalized, and insulated from society, then deplatform. If you don't deplatform them, though, you have to understand their message is going to poison public society. Alex Jones's ideas are going to push the Overton window, the window of acceptable public discourse, further and further and further to the right, to the extreme right. So the trade-off is, do you want Alex Jones and his batshit crazy ideas to be out there in the public where it can be criticized so he doesn't go too far off the deep end, but he's going to poison the rest of society with this shit? Or do you want to remove him and his ability to speak to YouTube's gigantic crowd? Do you want to remove him from that so that his listeners become more insulated from everybody else and more radicalized? This is how you get extreme groups, radical groups. Sometimes they just pop up and haven't been like removed from Twitter yet or whatever. But other times they've been removed and deplatformed and they've become more and more extreme, progressively more extreme as time goes on. I don't want people to be deplatformed. Basically ever. Almost ever. I don't want violence to be in the public forum. I don't want that to be an option that people look to. And when Greg Locke says things like, we're going to meet them with our Second Amendment right, that's violence. That is a thinly veiled threat of violence. That's when it's okay with me to deplatform somebody. The Overton window, we can let it get pushed to the right, let it get pushed to the left, and we can talk about these things and work it out and criticize the people that are saying this really batshit crazy stuff. But the moment it goes to violence, I'm done. I want them off. That's it. The legal line is obviously further down that road than I am. I would like for people to... I would like for Greg Locke to be removed from social media for this. I don't want him jailed. I want him removed from all social media for it. At this point, I think Locke's already removed from social media anyway, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, let's keep listening.
With our Second Amendment right, because look, they are trying to silence us, and I think our compromise is our silence. The fact that we are not willing to push back. And so I think big tech...
I don't know what this dude's smoking. The fact that we're not willing to push back. Are you kidding me? That is like all the right has been doing. Like QAnon has been... Didn't they have a bunch of Trump trucks literally trying to ram a Biden bus off the road? What do you mean not willing to fight back? Does that mean literally physically fight back? Because he already alluded to physical violence a second ago. A thinly veiled threat of physical violence. Is he saying he literally wants people to fight back? I mean, that's the only explanation I can pick up on here. Because the right already is fighting back in the colloquial sense.
I think big tech is in for a big rude awakening, because I think the Lord's going to turn this whole thing around and they're going to start breaking this stuff up. Lawsuits are going to come in, and it's not going to be good for them, but I think it's going to turn out good for us.
Ooh, I'm scared. Lawsuits, you say? It's not going to turn out good for them, but it'll turn out good for us. Like I said, the only thing that I genuinely fear from this guy is violence. I don't believe that violence has any place in public discourse, and that's his bargaining chip. That's what he has to offer to this conversation that hasn't already been offered, or that he hasn't already offered, at least. He wants violence. Let's read the article by Beth Stoneburner and see what he said. This is a quote from the video we just watched. This conservative censorship is true across the board. I've been banned from, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook has banned me, put me in jail many, many times. I love how he's comparing this to real life action. As if not having a Facebook account is like being in jail. Has he ever been in jail? Look, when it comes to our church and what we need to say and remaining open, that when they impede upon our First Amendment right, we'll meet them at the door of the tent with our Second Amendment right. That's a call for violence. There's no other way to twist that. That's what that is. And he would probably be willing to admit that to you. This is Beth Stoneburner speaking. To be clear, private websites are not obligated to spread hate speech or dangerous lies on their platforms. Their rules are not bound by the First Amendment. The Founding Fathers didn't include the right to tweet anything you want in the Constitution. The reason that I agree with her on this is because I can think of a real-world analog here, okay? If you're just some nutbag standing on a corner screaming at a crowd, no one's going to listen anyways, right? You're just some lone nut yelling on a street corner. No one cares. You go to Walmart, you make a scene, suddenly you've got everybody's attention. Okay, that's the real-world analog. That's the real-world analogy to what's happening right now. You go to your own website and start spouting off nonsense on your own website. Nobody's even going to listen. No one's going to go there or hear what you have to say. You go to Twitter, where a crowd already exists, and you start spouting it off. You have people around you who are now listening, right? Walmart is fully within their rights to kick your ass out. If you want to continue spouting off your nonsense, create your own website. That's the closest analog to a street corner. Seriously. You don't have a right to be in this company's realm. You don't have a right to be in this company's space. You do have a right to do what Alex Jones did and create your own website. You don't have to make it its own social media platform. You can do what InfoWars did. Just create a little video platform. Start uploading videos to it. That's exactly what Steven Anderson did, and that's what Alex Jones did, and all the crazy nutbags tend to do that nowadays. I guess you could say that what YouTube is doing is censorship in the strictest form, technically speaking, but it's not a violation of your First Amendment right in any way. It's not. Let's keep reading. And the government has an obligation to protect public health. So when they issue restrictions on all public gatherings due to the pandemic, and churches can easily just stream services online, as many have done, Locke suggests that he would shoot those government employees. If a Muslim or atheist or other non-Christian attempted to kill people looking out for everyone's best interests, it would arguably get more coverage. But when Locke does it, it's just another day that ends in day. I wish that society would get to a point where we all collectively didn't accept it when people like this talked about violence. That is my moral line. I wish we could get to the point where we don't accept violence as an option. But these companies have already kicked Greg Locke off anyway, so I really don't know what else can be done. I guess he's just going to keep screaming into the void until somebody reacts. As long as we're criticizing him and pointing out how crazy this shit is that he's saying, there will be a check to his power. That's exactly what Hemant Mehta's website is doing here. That's what Beth Stoneburner is doing. Responding to his insane shit. There continues to be a check on his power. But some people get more and more radical whether there's a check on it or not.